From last week, you'll remember the Jewish people have just made a choice that is hugely significant and important for their future, and that was the choice of operating system. Basically, they had an opportunity to choose the operating system for Eretz Israel. How would Eretz Israel function? Would it function by what the Ran calls Chok HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or Chok HaTeva, a divine law or natural law? That was a choice that they could make. They've had a few opportunities to make those choices. At the rock was one of those opportunities, and Hashem is disappointed in Moshe, believing, as we learned the parasha last week, that had Moshe given his shiur at the rock, which is what God had asked him to do, to give this magnificent, inspiring shiur, he would have been able to turn the people. People would have understood the importance of rather opting for divine law than physical law, the natural law. But he didn't. Moshe didn't do that. He accepted their decision and then used his stick to demonstrate what that is. That means you're going to get water out of a rock. You're going to have to do it with physical strength. You're going to have to do it by hitting the rock with a stick. It's not just by a few words, because they had chosen a more natural route than was possible for them. The very disappointing thing is that in today's parasha, in Parashat Balak, we see that while the Jewish people, I wouldn't say misunderstood, but underestimated the power of the word. When the word comes from Hashem, when the word is Torah, we talked about the power of words of Torah to change reality, to form reality, to restructure reality, and certainly the power of tefillah. The power of Torah and tefillah is something that the Jewish people had underestimated. But Balak, the king of Moab, doesn't underestimate it. And this is rather ironic, that we've just learned our own people said, we'll kind of just do things physically. And Balak now has a problem. He's confronted with this enormous nation wandering through the desert. He's really scared. Vayishlach malachim el Bilaam ben Beor. So he sends messengers to Bilaam. He doesn't send messages to his strategic allies to try and get more armies. That's not what he does. He sends a message to Bilaam, Likrolo, to call him Lemor, Hinei am yatzah miMitzrayim. This nation has come out of Egypt. Hinei chisait ein haaretz. It's covered the whole landscape of the land. V'hu yoshev mimuli, and now it's encamped right opposite my borders. Ve'ata, and now lechana arali et ha'am hazeh. Come and use your mouth to curse this nation, because you know and I know the power of the mouth, power of the word. Ki atzumu mimeni. This nation is too strong for me. But with your help, ulai uchal nakeh bo, perhaps together we can smite it. Va'agarshenu min haaretz, and I can expel it from this area. Ki yadati et asher tevarech mevorach va'asher ta'or yu'ar. Because I know that who you bless is blessed and who you curse is cursed. So Balak says to Bilaam, you, the master of words, I understand the power of words. The Jews don't understand the power of words. And that's why I'm going to be able to use the power of words to vanquish the Jewish people. So I need your help, your power of words, to do so. Bilaam also knows the power of words, but he also knows that the power of words is provided those words are aligned with Hashem and come from Hashem. Kohen Gadol had to align what he intuitively felt was the correct answer with what the Urim V'Tumim told him was the correct answer. There needs to be that alignment. But if there is that alignment, then the words are enormously powerful. The Gemara said that when the Kohen Gadol gave a decision based on the Urim V'Tumim, that decision was never changed. Hashem, there was no changing his mind or circumstances changing. With prophecy, sometimes things change. And it can happen that there's a prophecy, particularly a negative prophecy, and Hashem changes his mind because people do tshuva or whatever. But when the Kohen Gadol utters the truth that he has felt and affirmed with the Urim V'Tumim, there's no changing. That's how powerful those words are. And Bilaam realizes that he needs Hashem's permission. This has to be done with Hashem. So we're dealing with a very interesting character. Bilaam is interesting because he's colorful. He's interesting because he's comical. But he's also interesting because he's complex. And as we get to know him a little better, you'll see he's disturbingly familiar. When we read the parasha like children, as we generally read Chumash, we don't evolve. We learn Chumash in Cheder and in nursery school and in grade school, and those are the images that stay with us. And we don't evolve and we don't develop. But as we really get to understand Bilaam, we find that he's not this odd person out there, this prophet of the non-Jews, and speak to donkeys, and he's one of us. And we'll see how much that is so. Vayavoy lekimo Bilam laila. Hashem comes to Bilam and says to him, Im likro lecha ba'u anashim kum lech itam. After telling him not to go with the people, not to curse the people, Hashem now tells him, if they've called you to come with him, go with them. Va'ach et hadavar asher adaber. And only may you do what I tell you to do. Nothing else can you do. Vayakom Bilam baboker. Fine, so Hashem's given him permission. Bilam gets up in the morning. Vayachavosh et atzamo. He gets his donkey ready. Vayelech sarei Moav im sarei Moav. And he goes with the princes of Moab. And in the next verse, Vayichar af Elokim ki holechu. Hashem's now angry because Bilam is going. Vayityasev malach Hashem baderech. Then we have the story with the donkey. What's Hashem angry about? You just told him you can go. He's fulfilling your will. What are you getting angry about? Bilam is erratic. The Rebbeinu Shalom seems to be behaving in an erratic way. How does one make sense of all this? What Hashem is angry about is nothing that Bilam did. What Hashem is angry about is the inner place from which Bilam comes. And that's the title of the shir tonight. It's the inner place that makes the difference. The fact is, two people can do the same thing, but if they come from a different inner place, the results are completely different. And being able to access our inner places, to be able to have enough self-awareness to know what's going on in our inner place, to be able to have enough self-mastery to modify what's going on in our inner place, that becomes a crucially important tool for living and for influencing people. Most of the work that I do with leaders of businesses is around this. How do you know your inner place, and how do you recalibrate your inner place? Because that way, with very little effort, you can get a very different outcome. We tend to think the inner place is just our own thoughts and emotions and feelings and sealed from our interaction with the world, but it isn't so. Because the effectiveness of our interaction with the world is a function of the energy we project. It's not a function of the physical force we exert. That's back to the whole image, the whole metaphor of Moshe at the rock, isn't that right? That he could have spoken, he could have done it with his inner being. He didn't have to touch the rock. There didn't have to be any kind of physical connection with the rock. He could have done it all from his inner place. And Moshe chose instead to use an action, to do it with his doing rather than with his being. And the Das Kenim Ibala Tosfos says, even though Hashem gave Bilam permission, Mikol makom machshevet Bilam harasha nikeret mitoch ma'asav. If you look carefully at what he does, you'll understand that what was going on inside him wasn't okay. And that's what Hashem is upset about. We can do things on the outside, and we've had this idea now several days running. It happens sometimes, we've talked about it, the different shiurim intersect the ideas from the Daf Yomi and the Matmonim shir and the Parashat shir, and sometimes what we're working on in Shul on Shabbos. When one's working on these ideas, they come at us from different angles. And that usually means to me that this is something we need to be taking notice of right now. This idea that there's our outer world, something that I sometimes called our Reshut HaRabim, our public domain, where we interact with the world. The world sees us, we act, we're out there, we're doing. And there's the Reshut HaYachid, which is a very private inner domain. But the energy comes from the inner domain and is projected through the outer domain. So if you're just doing the outer, it doesn't have energy. If you're just doing the inner, the energy is not being projected. It's the effectiveness with which we can take our inner energy and project it outward that determines our success and our ability to accomplish. And sometimes two people will be doing the same things outwardly, but their inner places are completely different, and the results will be very different. Consider, for example, two people greet a stranger that walks into the room, let's say. And let's say the stranger is different. The stranger is of a different race, of a different ethnicity, of a different religion, and it's very clear. And the person walks in. And two people greet this person in exactly the same way. They both say, Shalom Aleichem, welcome, come and have a seat. They say it very nicely, very politely and courteously. But the one person really appreciates the value of human dignity. and sees dignity in this person. And the other person's a bit of a racist. But still he's polite. He's a polite racist, as most racists are. Do you think the person feels the difference? Of course he does. We can sense the energy. We sense the inner place from which it's coming. It's not just about the outer place. It's not just the smile on your face. It's where that smile comes from. It's not just the gesture or the words. It's where those gestures and words come from. And the Datzakeni Mibali Atosfa says, what Bilaam was doing was okay. God told him he could go. That wasn't the issue. But what was the source of energy that was driving that activity? Where was it drawing its energy from? You could have two fruit trees. One is drawing its water from a fresh spring, and one is drawing its water from a polluted pool. That's going to make a difference. Same trees producing the same fruit, but there's going to be a difference in the quality. And so the quality of our actions, of everything we do and everything we say, is affected by the energy from which we're drawing in order to nurture and nourish those actions. Where do we see that? Well, that Rashi tells us. Vayachaboshet atono, he fixes up his donkey, he loads his donkey. Says Rashi, that's not the kind of thing for a Bilaam to do. Bilaam is a great man in his society, a very great man. What's he busy doing? Filling his car up with gas and pumping up the tires? Surely he's got other people that can do that for him. That's not what he should be doing. That says Rashi, Hasin'am mekalkelet et hashura. When people are full of hatred, they are so passionate that they do whatever it takes to get the job done. And if that means I've got to pump my own tires to get there faster, to do the damage, I've got to put my own gas in, all the rest of it, that's what I'll do. Shechavashu ba'atzmo. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu rasha kvar kadamcha Avraham aviha. Don't think you're so fantastic because you're loading your own ass. Avraham did the same thing. As it says, Vayashkem Avraham baboker v'yachbosh et chamoro. Avraham loaded his own donkey as well. That too was driven from an inner place. But one was from an inner place of love, wanting to do Hashem's will, and one was from an inner place of hatred. We know that Bilaam's loading of his donkey didn't come from an inner place of love. This wasn't Bilaam saying, oh, wonderful, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go and bless the Jewish people. That's not what he was thinking. So why is he so excited? If it's not because of love, what is it? There are only two things that can excite to that degree: love and hate. It's either a defensive mechanism of anger and hate and fear, or it's love and generosity and a sense of wonder. It doesn't take a lot to realize that in Bilaam it's the hate. If Bilaam would just have done it a little more calmly and would have left a little later, had breakfast first while his staff prepared his donkey for him, then we wouldn't have seen this excitement in Bilaam. And he might have got away with it. But the excitement gives away the fact that what's going on inside him is not okay with Hashem. And he goes in Sarei Moav. Rashi says he's with the officers of Moav. It's not just that he accompanies them, he's with them. Libo kelibam shaveh. His heart and their heart are in the same place. As we watch him walk out arm in arm with the officers of Moav, he's not trying to keep a distance. He's not feeling a little embarrassed that I'm with these people and what they want me to do. God doesn't really want me to do. And he would then say, go on ahead, I'll follow. No. He's right with them. And he's talking and he's joking and they're really good buddies. That gives it away. And Hashem is angry, ki holechu ra'asha hadavar ra b'nei hamakom v'nitzaver lelech. Even though Hashem wasn't all that happy about it, surely you could see that. Okay, but Hashem gave you permission and you went. That's not the problem. The problem is nitzaver lelech. You craved to go. You couldn't wait to get out of the door. That was the problem. It's the inner energy that is out of place. It's not what you're doing. It's why you're doing it. And we've got to begin to train ourselves as we develop ourselves. And the idea of our learning Torah is not just to sit passively and learn Torah. The idea of our learning Torah is to develop ourselves, to become greater human beings. And part of becoming a greater human being is to be able to constantly monitor that inner place. Where's it really coming from? What's really driving me? Is it fear, jealousy, honor, ego? Or is it generosity, love, kindness, concern, service? What's really driving me? And that question is incredibly hard because one has to be enormously honest. And it's hard enough to be honest when you're talking to somebody else. But to be honest when you're talking to yourself is the hardest thing imaginable. Because nobody's giving you feedback, nobody's monitoring you. But we need to get better at that. The Chizkuni says a little bit differently, and that's interesting. So far we said, what was wrong? The inner place. The fact that Bilaam went, that was fine, God told him to go. That he went with too much enthusiasm, with too much excitement and hatred in his heart, and that was the problem. And then the Chizkuni says, why is Hashem angry? Sharei lo natan lo reshut befanim me'irot. Hashem didn't give him permission with a beaming face. Sometimes you ask somebody, do you mind if I do such and such? And they say, no, it's okay. And you think, fine, I've got their permission. Or maybe you've got their permission, but you don't have their blessing. There's a difference between having somebody's permission and having somebody's blessing. And Bilaam didn't have Hashem's blessing. He had his permission. And Bilaam knew that. And what's the appropriate response? If you say, do you mind if I do such and such? And the other person says, no, it's okay. What's the right response? No, just a second. That didn't sound very convincing. Can I ask you again? Do you give me your blessing? And then you'll have a real conversation. He should have understood from the first conversation that Hashem wasn't in favor of this. Just as with the Meraglim, if you remember a couple of weeks ago. Hashem says, Shlach lecha, go, send them, and we had the whole discussion. Is Hashem really saying send them? Or is Hashem saying, if you insist, then send them? It's not going to be the best decision, but if you want to, then do that. And most people took that view, that Hashem was saying, I'm not instructing you to send them, you're sending them, I'm allowing you to send the spies. And the same thing here says the Chizkuni, Bilaam should have realized that Hashem is saying, I'm not with you in this, I'm not instructing you to go with it. If you insist, I'm allowing you under certain conditions. And Bilaam should have said, okay Hashem, my energy comes from you. So if you're not thrilled about my going, what's the point? Of course I won't go. But he didn't. He went. Says the Chizkuni, that was his problem. But if you remember, when we learned Parashat Shlach Lecha, we said the Ramban had a different view. The Ramban's view was that this was a mitzvah. God was saying, Shlach Lecha, I'm telling you to send these spies. And we discussed and we learned. Once they'd made the decision to follow natural law rather than divine law, then Hashem says, if you're following natural law, you have to have intelligence. You have to send out spies. That's what you've got to do. I wish you would have made a different decision about which operating system to choose. I wish you would have chosen divine law, and then you wouldn't have needed spies. But since you chose natural law, you do need spies, is the way we explained the Ramban. So how does the Ramban learn our piece of Chumash with Bilaam? And he says, what Hashem told him is, you under no circumstances will you curse the Jewish people. And therefore I'm saying to you, what's the point of going there? They want you to curse. They're hiring you to curse. I'm telling you that's not going to happen. So why go? That's what Hashem says in the beginning. They then continue and they bring more money and more impressive people. Balak didn't believe that God had said no. He added many more officers to go and princes to go and persuade him and offer him a lot more money. Bilaam has ego, as we'll see, and he's taken by this. He's saying to himself and to Hashem, come on Hashem, do you really expect me to turn down an opportunity like this? This is an opportunity. This wouldn't be coming to me if it wasn't the right thing for me to be doing. How can I turn down? This is a business opportunity that I'm being given. And then Hashem says to them, I've told you that the nation is blessed and you won't curse them. And now, if they've simply come to ask you because they want the honor of your company, then fine, tell them that I've said you can't curse the nation. If you want me to come, I'm happy to come. But I can't curse the nation without it. Not only that, but if Hashem tells me to bless them, I'm going to have to bless them. That's the conditions of the contract. If you want me to come, that's how I'm going to have to come. And if I instruct you to bless them, I want you to be sure not to be afraid of Balak. You've got to stand up on your moral principle, and you've got to do what I tell you to do. And if if Balak says, well, I'm sorry, if you're not going to do what we need you to curse them, we don't need you to bless them, so don't come at all, then you've got to be willing to let the job go. And we see here a really important principle in business, an important principle in life. You've got to be very clear of what your terms are. And I'm not just talking about your contractual and your legal terms. You've got to be very sure about what your moral terms are, what your spiritual terms are, what your religious terms are. I remember my very first job outside of the rabbinate. I was in my early 20s, and I was quite excited because I was offered a job with a very prestigious international trading company based in New York, owned by frum people and managed by frum people. I thought, this is going to be amazing. Moved to New York and work in this trading company, and being surrounded by religious people. This will be amazing. And in the interview, I said to the CEO, I notice you're not wearing a yarmulke. I notice you're not wearing a kippah. That's your business, but I will be wearing a kippah. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. So I had to be prepared to walk away from that. And then my next interview was with the South African commodities trading company, not religious people, very fine people running it, but not religious people. And I was dreading the same conversation. We're having the conversation and everything's going really well. And I said, there's one last point. We got through Shabbos and we got through Yom Tov. I had to deal with Shabbos. Shabbos was okay. Yom Tov was a problem. They said, well, what's going to happen? You're busy with a transaction. There's a ship that needs to be loaded or unloaded. There's a problem with it. And you're in shul. It's Yom Tov. What are we going to do? So I said, what would you do if I was in hospital and I'd had a heart attack? What would you do? You'd figure it out. So I'm giving you advance notice of the days I'm going to be in hospital with heart attacks. Except I won't be in hospital with heart attack. I'll be in shul, same thing. And they laughed, and that was good. So we covered that. I said, last thing, I wear a kippah, I wear a yarmulke when I wear it. They said, that's okay, but there's only one condition. I thought, the next job's going to go now. And they said, we have one client who is virulently anti-Semitic. When you go and visit that client, can you put on an even bigger kippah? But you've got to be willing to walk away. You've got to be able to say, if I can't have it on my moral terms, on my spiritual, religious terms, then it's okay. And that's what Hashem says to Bilaam. You've got to know you can only bless, you can't curse. I'm letting you go with him. If you can make a lot of money out of this transaction, good luck to you. Make the money. But you need to know that when you tell them, and you've got to tell them up front, you can't be dishonest about it. Hashem says, it's clear in the Ramban. Why doesn't he say to Bilaam, you know what, go along with them, and when it's time to curse them, you'll bless them. And that way you'll make the money and everything will be fine. Or you'll curse them in some funny words, they won't even understand what you're saying, and then you'll bless them silently, quietly. Now Hashem says, you've got to tell them up front. If I come with you, and Hashem tells me to bless them, I will bless them. And if they say, in that case, deal cancelled, then that's fine. You've got to be able to walk away from the deal. And that's a lesson to all of us. This parasha of Bilaam was not put into the Torah as a comical kind of sideshow. A man talking to a donkey talking to a man. That's not what it's about. Every line of this parasha is to teach us how to behave. And this coaching that Hashem gives to Bilaam, which Bilaam doesn't follow, that's coaching to all of us. The Ramban says, furthermore, Hashem was angry with him because he went with the intention of cursing. It was quite clear that his intention was not to bless. And furthermore, there was Chilul Hashem, because he was acting in a way that Balak would have looked at and said, does God not make up his mind? One day you can go, the next day you can't go. It made God look bad. And that was also not okay. So what do we have here? We seem to have a split personality. We've got this man, Bilaam, who won't do anything without asking God. And he tells Balak, he tells his clients, I can't do it if Hashem doesn't let me. I've got to go back and to ask Hashem. And if you want to pay me more money, well, let me just ask one more time. Maybe Hashem will, but I can't do it without Hashem. You've got this man who's completely tuned into the idea, more so than the Jewish people seem to have been. They decided, no, we're not speaking to the rock. We're not davening in front of the rock. We're not learning Torah in front of the rock. Just hit that rock and get the water. Not Balak and not Bilaam. They understand. This is about words. This is about the power of the heart. This is about the power of the spirit and what it can accomplish. And Bilaam really understands that. And on the other hand, we have a man who's willing to destroy the Jewish people, even though he knows quite well that Hashem has said no. He's willing to disobey Hashem, and yet he follows Hashem. What is he? Who is he? So we understand some of the problem from the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in the fifth parak of Pirkei Avot, where the Mishnah says, anybody who has these three qualities is a talmid of Avraham, and the different three qualities is a talmid of Bilaam. So Avraham and Bilaam are two opposite types of characters. Ayin tova v'ruach nemucha v'nefesh shvela, a generous eye and a modest, a humble spirit. Mitalmidav shel Avraham, that's a student of Avraham. But ayin ra'ah, if he has a meanness to him, v'ruach gvo'ah, and he has arrogance, v'nefesh rechava, and a very addictive personality, then mitalmidav shel Bilaam harasha. And that links into the Mishnah in Perik Dalet, where Rabbi Yezer Hakpar Omer Hakina v'hatava v'hakavod motzin et ha'adam min ha'olam. The three drives that destroy a person's lives are three addictions: jealousy, cravings, and ego, honor. Those are the addictions that can destroy a person's peace of mind and that can destroy a person's life. And they tie into this ayin ra'ah, ruach gvoha, and nefesh rechavat. So the ruach gvoha that the talmidim, the students of Bilaam have, relates to kavod, to that egocentric person who has the desire for kavod. And it's Bilaam's desire for kavod that causes his downfall. And Balak knows how to play that. When Bilaam says no, Balak can't believe it. And what does he respond? Well, let's send more money. Let's send a bigger delegation. Let's invite him to the White House. Let's treat him a little better. And finally Bilaam gets it. This is an opportunity, and his need and his craving for honor makes him want it that badly. But have a look at this. Rabbi Lapin, my great uncle, speaks about why does it say these qualities are found in the disciples of Avraham and in the disciples of Bilaam? Why doesn't it say these qualities are found in Bilaam? And Rabbi Elia explains, because you wouldn't see those qualities in Bilaam. If Bilaam walked through the door right now, believe me, you would all stand up. And you would bring a chair for him in the Mizrach, and you would ask him to sit down. That's how impressive he would be. He would be dressed for the part, he would look like a serious leader, he would be somebody that you respect enormously. Bilaam's exterior was perfect. You wouldn't see a crack in it. The desire for kavod, the ego, was buried deep inside. Says Rabbi Elia, when a teacher of Torah, not just of Torah, when a leader's outside is perfect and the inside, the character is flawed, you can't see it. And that's why you find people follow weird guys. You often find people afterwards, many of them are sitting in jail right now as we talk, and they had and have big followings of people. Why? Because you can't see the flaw. Everything's perfect on the outside. Where do you see the flaw, says Rebbe? You see the flaw in their students. Their students aren't able to hide the flaws. They pick up the flaws from their teacher, and it becomes part of their character. And so the Mishnah says you won't find kavod and kinah and ta'ava if you look at Bilaam. He'll fool you. But look at his students, and then you'll understand his character better. It goes so far, says Rebellia, that sometimes people have talents, and particularly leaders and teachers and rabbonim. And Rebellia says that talent can come from two places. They have the ability to inspire and to influence large numbers of people. That could come from two places. It could come from the people's need for it. So Hashem sometimes bestows a talent on somebody so that he can do good work. And he does good work with the talent that he's given. And then you've got another person who's worked all his life to develop that talent, who's worked and developed himself and grown his character and his stature. The inner place has also worked. The first example of an individual is an individual who's only worked on the outer. He knows how to present, he knows how to talk, he's charismatic. He's got all the outer trappings needed, but there's nothing inside. And unless you know him very well, you won't even know that. The other person has worked on the inside. And when he speaks, when he teaches, you tap into something very deep in him, something very real and very authentic. One has authenticity and the other does not. And Rebellious says when a talent is a gift, so we talk often about this as a gifted person, it's a terrible insult, according to Rebellious, to say to somebody, you're gifted. Because gifted means you didn't work for it, which means it isn't really yours. Somebody else gave it to you. Hashem gave you the talent. And Rebellious uses that to explain why Bilaam is so erratic, up and down. 1 minute he's saying, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, and we put it in our siddur, it's so magnificently beautiful. And the next minute he's denying God and serving idolatry and cursing the Jewish people. What happens? How does he go up and down? He seems to be completely bipolar. Explains Rebellious when the holiness or the talent or the inspiring ability that you have is a gift, it's not permanent. You've got it while you're conscious of it. You've got it while you're working on it. But when you let go, there's nothing there. It's all gone. It's just an illusion. It's a bubble. But somebody who's worked on themselves, Avraham Avinu, who's worked for every standard and level and quality that he's got within himself, when you've got such a person, that's completely different. Then that person's qualities remain with him, are part of him, and they're steady, they're consistent. And so this is not only about the way we look at others, although it's about that as well. Sometimes people get very disappointed. There's a rabbi who's done amazing work and everything's wonderful, and let's assume that it's not just Lashon Hara, but really he's done some bad things and he gets into trouble and he loses his reputation and everybody feels disappointed. There's nothing to feel disappointed about. We have to clarify the difference between people who have a gift because the nation needed that gift, and Hashem gives that gift to certain people so as to give the nation what they need, and when the nation no longer needs it, he takes the gift away and they're nothing. Once the gift is gone, they're nothing. And the person who's worked on themselves throughout their lives and built themselves up, their gifts and talents aren't dependent on Hashem's generosity. He's worked on them, he's earned them himself. And we have to differentiate when we look at people and we evaluate people without being judgmental, but we've got to evaluate people because we've got to decide whether we trust people or not. One of the elements of trust is authenticity. And we've got to be very careful not to confuse charisma with authenticity. Sometimes an authentic person is blessed and he has charisma, but not necessarily so. Sometimes a charismatic person has nothing inside. It's all polish on the surface. And we live in a world that values surface, that values packaging. One of the very first things I was told when I came to the United States and when we immigrated, the very, very first thing I told, I couldn't believe and didn't believe. It took me about 15 years before I believed it. It was business advice that I was given which I didn't take. The business advice was, don't spend any time on the quality of your product. It makes no difference. All that's important is the packaging and presentation. That's America. That was the advice I was given by a wise person. And I realized much later on, there's so much truth in that. We live in an age of packaging and appearance and outer shell. And in our interaction with people, we tend to do that as well. And we've got to understand that authenticity means there's something deep inside the person, that when you experience the person, you're not just experiencing the externality, the Reshut HaRabim, you're experiencing the inner energy that they've worked on all their lives to develop. And you're feeling and experiencing some of that. That was an Avraham Avinu. And Bilaam is the opposite. And the second is never underestimate, the second part of this to remember for our own application, is never underestimate the value of investing in yourself, of spending time and effort to do things properly in the area of Yiddishkeit, in the area of spiritual development, of self-development, of leadership development, to become a better and a more effective human being. Don't look for the shortcuts. That's like going to the gym. When I work with a trainer in the gym, I sometimes say to him, can't we just skip out the first 18 press-ups and just do the last 2? Because that's where the ones that really count. So why do they? Don't look for the shortcuts. There aren't shortcuts. When you're investing, there are no shortcuts. You invest every day. You invest. That's what spiritual growth is. And you've got to ask yourself every day, at the end of every day, how much have I invested in my own spiritual growth today? And investment is hard. Investment needs honesty. Investment needs work. It needs exploration. It needs discovery of new ideas, absorbing of those new ideas into oneself, applying them and living with them. And only that way does it become one's own. Only that way are you building the inner place, not just the outer place. So that you're not just becoming a bigger and bigger container with no content, but that you're actually building the content as well. So that when people experience you, what they experience is not just the container, they experience the content. Because the container is not unique. As containers, we're all pretty much the same. It's the content that makes us each unique and different. But we need to each develop our content. And so let's be, from the talmidim of Avraham Avinu, the people who are able to grasp that and to understand that the things we've achieved are our own achievements. They're not gifts. The talents that we have are not just gifts. They're things we've worked on very hard to perfect and to improve. And we don't rely on our God-given gifts, even if we are given God-given gifts. Look at some of these sportsmen and some of the musicians and the artists who've got God-given talent. They had it as little kids. Look how hard they work. And what happens to the ones that don't work hard? They lose it. There comes a point where Hashem takes it away from them. And all the talent is all of a sudden gone. I don't know why I was so moved by the story in the news about this McAfee committing suicide in prison. I haven't thought of McAfee since the days when you used to get McAfee security software. And it's still there, but we're not conscious of it. So there's a man that changed the world and created an internet and computer security. And he committed suicide in a Spanish jail. And I looked at his life, and you look at this messed up life. Such a talented genius. What happened? Hashem gave him the talent. He'd used it to create security for internet, which is what we need in order for the world to function. And done. The world doesn't need him anymore. Hashem takes the talent away from him. He didn't build it all himself. That's a gift from God. And we've got to notice what our gifts are and take those gifts and build them and work on them and invest on them. And not rely on the fact that it's a gift, that we're gifted, that we're talented. We're all gifted. But the gift is only a starting point. We've got to be like an Avraham Avinu and make it our own. So we don't jump, we don't move up and down. We're not bipolar. We don't lose it at some point when Hashem feels we don't need it anymore. We acquire it, we own it because we've invested in it. And in that way we're able to build that inner part and strengthen and reinforce the energy that makes us effective in everything that we do.